Have you ever wished to slip between the pages of a book? I would stand and watch as a fire roared through the bifurcated city of Ankh-Morpork, or try to peek into the window of the hole in the ground where there lived a hobbit. I'd never leave the Shire, but I'd want to smell the grass and feel the sun on my skin as I walked through Hobbiton. Hi, I'm Dakota, and today I am talking with Kate Quinn, author of The Astral Library. Thank you so much for being here, Kate.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Um, for folks who've not yet heard of The Astral Library, can you give a short description of what it is?
Yes, absolutely can. This is a book that came about because of a single question that popped up in my mind. And that question was, have you ever wanted to live inside a book? Now, I think for bookworms everywhere, the answer to that is a resounding yes. It certainly is for me. And that is the seed of inspiration that this whole novel came from. Welcome to the Astral Library, which is a liminal space that can open from any library in the world. It contains all the books that were ever written or that ever will be written. And it can look like any dream library that you've ever imagined for yourself. For me, that was the reading room of the Boston Public Library. For you, it might be Trinity College in London, or it might look like the library from your favorite fantasy novel. I bet it has a sliding ladder. And in the Astral Library, books are not only objects, they are gateways to new lives. And you have the opportunity as a reader for, if you are lost and desperate and in need of a new life, to be able to join the characters of your favorite book and live inside that world, according to that world's rules. Nothing more than that. I will leave you to discover what the rules are and exactly how one particular lost and desperate bookworm from Boston gets her invitation to the Astral Library. But I do hope you all enjoy it.
I think anybody who likes to read is going to enjoy this one because it does really put you into these stories in a really kind of different way than I've experienced with like portally books. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's my first opportunity. This has been my first opportunity, writing anything with magic in it. Historical fiction is my usual wheelhouse. So I had to do all this thinking about, how do the rules work? And, the world building, which is, I guess, one thing for historical fiction, but I've never had to, in my world building before, think about, well, how does the magic work? How do the portals work? And I ended up having to do a lot of thought about that. And the thing I really enjoyed was that the idea that when you are, say going into Sherlock Holmes's London and, the world that has 221B Baker Street, I thought, well, all right, this is London in the Victorian era, but it's not historic London in the Victorian era. This is London in the Victorian era as depicted by the author. And that's a whole kind of different world and a different set of rules. And it made me really think, and I think readers will have fun with this too. What book world would you want to live in? And because there's a lot of book worlds that I love, I don't think I'd want to live there because we love books because they're filled with Stormont Drang and adventure. And adventure is great, but you don't want to be surrounded by the kind of chaos and violence that some of our favorite book worlds have. So when you're thinking about what world you want to escape into, you have to think, well, what is my likelihood of getting killed in this world? That might be certainly a lot higher if you're going to George R. R. Martin's Westeros versus if you're going to Jane Austen's England.
Th- So, a mild spoiler, but there's a hilarious little blurb from the librarian about Jane Austen, and folks wanting to go there all the time. I thought it was very funny. So, especially considering you write historical fiction.
Well, it's one of those things that, historical fiction is sort of where I ended up, but fantasy was kind of my gateway drug to reading as a whole and to the love of story. And that's because when I was a kid and before I could read myself, my dad read to me a lot. And one of the things that he read was, some of those early childhood aimed fantasy series. So by the time I had hit first grade and I was starting to learn to read, he and I had already read through all the books of L. Frank Baum's Oz. We had already read through all of the Narnia series. And, so I spent so much of my childhood, poking around in the back of wardrobes, trying to find that door to the snowy forest and the lamppost. And, thank goodness I did not grow up in tornado country. Because I think if I had, and I'd seen a twister coming my direction, I would have been like, yes, take me to Oz. I want my red, yellow brick road. And, that would have been the end of me. So it is that idea that other worlds exist, just a tornado ride or a secret door away, is one of those things that enchanted me as a kid who's just learning to love stories. And really, I would say I never got over that. Fantasy continues to be something that is an escapist joy for me. I went from Narnia and Oz, and then I went on to the Dragon Riders of Pern and Alana of Tortall and the girls having the adventures, and then I wanted onto the classics like Tolkien, and then it was George R. Martin, and then it became the Origins in, and why am I blanking on the name, the Origins in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. And then I found so much more, and I continue to find more. Now I'm onto R.F. Kuang, and I'm reading G.R. McAllister, who is a great fantasy author who does this matriarchal series I adore so much that I actually gave it a cameo in the book. And so it's like fantasy continues to be something that is still an escapist for me, even if I have never found the actual door to a fantasy world.
Well, that kind of brings us to the beginning of the Astral Library. We meet Alex, who is a very down and out type of character. She's the intro is my absolute favorite because she's sitting in a grocery store trying to do the math of how much this food is going to cost her and if she has enough money in her bank account. And I have absolutely done this so many times, and I thought you captured it so well. But then it does go right into this fantasy, and I love it so much.
Well, Alex is, somebody. I was not a foster care kid. She is someone who was aged out of the foster care system, and because her mother did a bunk on her, and she has grown up lonely and guarded and bouncing from place to place. She doesn't have a place to call her home. And now that she's an adult, life is hard. And I have not been where she is exactly, but I have absolutely been, spent years of my life living paycheck to paycheck and, doing that math in your head when you're looking at your grocery cart and just thinking, because you know exactly to the penny what you have in your bank account and you're trying to calculate the sales tax and like, how far is this going to take you down to the line before you get paid next? And I remember that. I remember that vividly. I don't have to do that anymore, but it's a feeling I never want to forget. And I never want to not remember that there are, so many people for whom this is a constant and it is who do live this way. And it's a terrible way to live. It grinds on you. And so the idea that libraries for people like this are so important because library books are one of the few things that one of the few true luxuries and joys of life that are completely free. And when you're on a really tight budget, a pleasure that you don't have to pay for is like the biggest godsend in the world. So Alex is working 3 jobs flat out, just flat broke all the time, has a couch surfing arrangement rather than an actual lease or a rental. And the real only pleasure that she has is books. She can escape into books. Books, unlike people, have never let her down. And, it is one of those things where so many foster kids, since you don't get to hang on to very much, what you can hang on to in the way of belongings can be very precious. And I talked when I was writing Alex's character with a fellow author who not only was a foster kid herself, but was a foster mom. And she was helping me get this, character hopefully as true and accurate as I could. And so one of Alex's most prized possessions is she has a copy, very worn, very battered, paperback of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is the third in the Narnia series. It's my own favorite in the Narnia series. And this is the world she's gone back to. And it's the place that she dreams of when her own life looks so very dull and gray and hard and uninspiring.
So I think libraries provide a lot of sanctuary for people. And so this being set in a library itself makes a lot of sense to me because she is looking for not just sanctuary, but belonging. And that's one of the main themes in the book is, do I belong anywhere? And like, who chooses me at some point? Um, so it's kind of a maudlin undertone, but it's really hopeful.
Well, it's one of those things that the joy of when you read a book is that, you get these adventures where, the heroes gets, it's literally the call to adventure. The hero is chosen, you get to be the chosen one. And, it makes us all dream of being the chosen one, from our own lives. And I think I remember seeing some funny comic where it said, someone said, it's like someone said, it's like, I didn't get reaped for the Hunger Games. I didn't open a door into Narnia. A Twister never carried me off to Oz. I'm really hoping on my 11th birthday that, I get the invitation to the Shire, because that's all I got left at this point. And I think we've all had a shade of that. It's like, where's my door to Narnia? Where's my invitation letter to Camp Half Blood? Or, I don't think I wanted to go to the Hunger Games, but we've all had that little thing of like, when can it be me? And Alex really thinks that because she's someone who has not had really any breaks in her life. She never gets picked. She never gets a break for the adventure, the easier road, the place that she can call her own. And that's the joy of the Astral Library for her once she sees it, is that it looks like, the most comforting and wonderful library in the world. And it makes her feel safe for the first time.
Um, I don't know how far you are willing to talk into the book, but I'd like to at least get to the librarian, because she is a snarky, very interesting character. So in this world, there is um, in the library, there's this, she's kind of like forever, this librarian. Um, and she straight up tells Alex, "You're not the chosen one. You're just one of many." Um, so explain that a little bit, I guess.
Well, I knew from the beginning that, any magical space is going to need a guardian of some kind. And I thought, so therefore I have the librarian, capital L, and she is sort of a little bit of a homage to, my own mom, who is a librarian and who has a wonderful sense of snark. And she's supposed to be also the quintessential librarian. So she's got a bun and a cardigan and, glasses and a glare, and you really don't want her to shush you. And, but she's more than that. She's more badass than that, as you will come to see in the midpoint of the book. And it is her job, not only is she the guardian of the books and the space itself, but she is sort of the shepherd for people, bookworms, to whom the Astral Library opens a door and offers a chance. And so it's her job to, help these people onto their new lives. And to her, I didn't want to sort of turn on its head the classic, hero's journey, which Alex is very aware of. I like things that can play with a little bit of a wink, because I always think that, like, whenever these kids, get that door to Narnia in a fantasy world or whatever it is, why do none of them ever seem to have read a book before and understand the plot? Like, maybe not the plot specifically of this world, but it's like, have you ever read a book before? And, like, do you know any of the tropes? Come on. And so I thought I wanted to make Alex the type of girl, she's read everything. She's ready for this. She's primed. So she gets there and she's like, okay, quest. What's the quest? Do I get to be a queen? Is there a dragon? Where do I get to go? Where's the road? So therefore she's like the one who's primed to think of all the stories and all that she's read and all the ways that this could possibly work out for her. And then I had fun for the library, having the librarian be the one to puncture her and say, no, that's not how this works. And the librarian unfolding something different and being, of course, snarky and cranky and exasperated, because I also think the best mentor figures are, are, often a little bit grumpy from Gandalf on. And, I wanted to turn the idea on its head too, that like she's not necessarily the wise and benevolent mentor. She's cranky. She's got a job to do. She's on a budget. She doesn't have unlimited time for your questions. So I had fun playing with her, and I had fun giving them that spark and that snap back and forth. And, developing, the rules of this library and the way it works. And not only the rules, but the tools of it. Like, since my mother was a librarian, I grew up running around libraries. And so there are so many things, and my mom did help me when I was like building this world. She's just like, think of all the things that come in a library, like a library stamp, like an old-fashioned card, like the kind that, which got, that where you wrote down the book and the due date. Like, those terrifying paper cutters with those arms that are like this long and they go up and down like a guillotine and you can't see one without imagining your fingers getting cut off. Or like, the globe, that goes around, that's in so many libraries in one section or another. And all the little tools and tricks that go around a library. And I had fun imagining, from the stamp to the card catalog, what would those look like in a magic library, and how would they work, and how do they enhance the setting, and how did they become tools for the librarian herself. And I had a lot of fun with that. So yeah, the librarian is cool, is very cool, at least to me. And I don't often have, like actors in mind when I do this, but I did kind of have one, like with some if people always ask, who do you think would play her? Well, I had just been watching the TV series The Expanse and seeing the fabulous Shora Agdashlu, who goes swans around with the most cranky, snarky attitude and, dropping F-bombs and looking fabulous. And I thought, and she has this smoky voice. And I just thought, I think that's the librarian. That is definitely the librarian. So much so that I made my librarian, she is Iranian, and she comes from, as much as you learn about her background, you do learn a little bit about her, and she's from Iran. So
I love that you made Christian the like archetype for this.
well, I love that character, and so kind of in my mind, my librarian is a little mix of like Christian Avasarala from The Expanse, and then like the classic quintessential librarian with a bun and glasses and a shush.
Yeah, I mean, Christian pushes the envelope for a regular librarian, that's for sure.
Yeah, probably my version is less glam, but still, it's a little bit there.
Were there any like tools that you really wanted to be able to use for the library, but that just didn't seem to fit the setting?
Well, one thing that I would have liked to put in, but it's a little bit idiosyncratic, is that the library where I grew up running around in, that my mom worked in, the children's section had a bathtub. It was a clawfoot, enormous, like Victorian bathtub, like stands on its big claw feet, and it was padded on the inside with quilts and pillows. And it was this, you could climb in there with your book and read, and it would fit like three little girls, with like, the Saddle Club paperbacks, or like two exhausted moms with like a baby in a snuggly and like the latest, Maeve Binchy. And that bathtub was magic. I mean, it like children instinctively understood that it could fly. And, if you got in, it might decide to like levitate off the ground and take you off to whatever book world you're in. And it made adults into like giggling kids who forgot all about their to-do list and like climbed in for a little me time with a good book. And I would have liked to put that into the Astral Library, but I'm aware that like most libraries don't have a bathtub. So I was like, this probably is a little too idiosyncratic to be quite understood unless you grew up with this particular thing. But I did. I was lucky enough, and I tend to think nowadays that all libraries, Astral or otherwise, should have a bathtub filled with quilts and pillows in the kids section for people to read it. I highly recommend that as a reading experience.
Kind of off topic, but where I live, there is a children's museum, which is basically interactive children's toys, and there's a tree that children can climb into, but like adults don't fit. And so there's like a little house in the bottom that they did a very similar thing where they put blankets and pillows, and you could go crawl in there and hide from everyone. So. I love this.
I love that.
Um, but I would absolutely see Alex sitting in a bathtub with a bunch of blankets.
Well, if I ever wrote another Astral Library book, which I haven't totally ruled out, I might put the bathtub in there, and maybe it does fly. Who knows?
Um, so moving on to what you decided to kind of include as settings, because the settings are varied and wild and a little bit, um, well, they're books, you know? Was there a book that you really wanted to include that you just couldn't in some way? Or I kind of want people to experience what is actually in there on their own. So,
Well, I would have loved to include Narnia because that is the world that I would go to if if I was asked to do what book world would I like to live in. Because Narnia is a fabulous place and you get to be a queen. I thought that was very cool as a kid, and I frankly still do. And it's got fantastic magical creatures, but since it's a kid's world, the violence tends to be on the lower side. So it's like, okay, your happy ending is a little more assured here than it is in a more dangerous fantasy world. That's right. And it was so I would have loved to include that, but it is not in the world of Narnia is not in the public domain. And so therefore you can't just include that because it is still under copy under under public domain rules. And so that's why there's a rule in this particular in the rule of the world of the Astral Library is you can only go to worlds that are in public domain. And that is partly, because, I thought it was a fun chance to do a little tongue in cheek talking about, the rules of copyright and, the rules, it's like if you're not allowed to reproduce and quote portions of a book or, revamp the story as the way it pleads you, ethically speaking, why on earth would you be allowed to go live in a book without, that's covered under that same rule? And Alex is sort of like, I am positive this is not covered under copyright law. But but that's the rule. You can't go to a world that's not public domain. And so therefore that also means that not only could I have fun, talking about that, it means also I don't want to get sued. So therefore I could limit myself to worlds that are under public domain and that can be used and reformed. And also I that meant that I could, reach more readers because I can use the worlds that readers have been using as a playground for fan fiction or for spin-offs or for that have been appearing in constant movie adaptations for years and years, worlds that are already in our consciousness as well as the public domain. So one of the first things I did for this book when I knew that there was going to be a certain amount of jumping from book to book is like, what worlds am I going to use? Like, what are the ones that people know? What are the ones that are like part of our national consciousness as readers? Like, what are the ones that everybody knows? So I'm making lists of like the Great Gatsby and Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie's worlds and Jane Austen's worlds and Charles Dickens's worlds and all kinds of lists. And I probably didn't get to every single book that I wanted to because this book could not be 800 pages long. But I did have fun picking the worlds that I did choose and sort of getting to play within them.
I mean, even though you didn't include a lot of stories, I still found myself wondering what I would be doing in them between chapters. I'd be like, would I even want to step foot in Frankenstein? I don't think so. I think I would cry and then leave immediately. So,
Yeah, well, as I said, it's like when you walk into someone's world, you're walking into the world the way the author envisions it. So Mary Shelley's imagination is, I think, a little bit of it's an impressive and fabulous space, but it's a little bit of an intimidating one. I'm not sure I would want to spend a lot of time there, or I'd be looking behind me to make sure that nothing is sneaking up on me.
there's a lot of walking too, so like, you'd have to be real good at it. Um, but you also have this wonderful character, Bo, who is the romantic interest for Alex. We meet him at the very beginning, and he actually owns a shop where he designs and sews period outfits. So can you talk a little bit about who Bo is in this story?
Well, I had him in mind because one of my great joys is that I love following historical costume people on Instagram, and these people who make these exquisite fantasy meets history. Sometimes it's clothes that are like absolutely historically accurate, and sometimes it's like a historical plus a fantastical mashup of clothes. And they take these gorgeous photos, and you see these videos of like what it's like to be putting these crystal beads into a replica outfit, inspired by the Snow Queen in Hans Christian Andersen, or like the making a replica of Claire's red dress from Outlander, or a replica of a Lord of the Rings costume from Galadriel, or or it's just like this is a classic robe a la française from exactly this decade of the 18th century. And these sites are just they're such gorgeous timeline cleansers. So there's so many of these that I follow, and I love the historical costume people. Another site that I love to do just to give me a snicker when I need a smile is a site called Frock Flicks. And they literally do a thing where they will watch historical movies and snark the costumes on whether they are accurate or not. So you will have people, they will be going into an absolute froth about you do not have back lacing on an 18th century gown. These are gowns that close in the front, and I am seeing zipper tabs here. And and it's like I totally get it. I'm someone who obsesses about historical details, so I get getting all frothy about inaccurate clothing details. And so I thought I wanted to do a little service to this in the book. And so I have Bo, who is a costumer, who is a historical costume nerd, and who has poured all of his considerable talent as a designer into a shop where he does historical costumes and historical replicas. He goes around dressed, like he can be going around dressed like anything from Louis the 14th, the Sun King, in a fabulous embroidered coat, or looking like the Duke from Bridgerton, and a fabulously tied cravat and frock coat and hessian boots. And he wears his own stuff, and he makes his own stuff, and he comes along because one of the things the Astral Library does do is that it has to outfit people, its patrons, so they look appropriate to the world that they're going to be going into. And when Alex needs a dress, she figures, well, I don't have a fairy godmother, but I do have a friend on Newbury Street with a shop. And so he ends up being a little bit her, not only a love interest, but he is costuming her for her various book adventures. And because I love a good makeover scene, who does not? And it was something that I wanted to do as well, because Alex is a plus sized girl. And I wanted to show that, if you have a plus sized heroine, and no, I do not mean, oh, she's a size 10, she's plus sized. No, that is no. But I wanted to show that you can be a plus size gal and get fabulous clothes. And that is what she does. And Bo, for all the fact that he is kind of a fashion plate himself, is very body positivity and very like, no, I will have you looking fabulous. And it is not going to involve trying to like squeeze you into something that will not make you feel comfortable, because you need to feel beautiful. And so this is also part of Alex feeling chosen. Finally, she gets to feel beautiful. She gets to after a lifetime of clothes bought on the cheap, for, secondhand, finally get the perfect dress. And I will say too, one of the other major bits of inspiration is a French designer I follow who has literally created book dresses. And they are old volumes of books, like 19th century old books that she has unpicked and then made gowns out of the spines and out of the pages. And these dresses are the most exquisite things you've ever seen. And you should look them up. Just Google book dress. You'll see the pictures. And I thought, I'm pulling that dress into this book world at some point, or something like it, because it's too beautiful not to be inspirational.
For folks out there who might be offended by this very idea of pulling the books apart, there's many reasons why we can do this.
No, she actually has said these were books that were intended for a landfill. I mean,
Yeah.
these are old books. They're slated for destruction. I think they were mostly like the pages are disintegrating. So she unpicked the covers and then, this old leather and then made old leather and like old cloth and so forth, and then made this beautiful work of art out of them. I think it's a great way to repurpose books at the end of their lives. Why not?
Are they practical style dresses, or are they like you can't really wear them because they're made of paper and old leather?
I think hers, though hers can be worn. I mean, it's like I think because she also, uses it. There's like rattan and netting and lace as the
Yeah.
foundation for it, and they look like they can be worn. I mean, like it's. I think there's a lot that can be impractical about high couture. So you probably like, would you want to run a marathon in it? No, but I remember one of the historical clothing uh, experts that I did follow. She said, I have people asking all the time. It's like, is it comfortable? And she said, it depends on what you want to do with it. People seem to have the idea that historical clothes, like modern clothes, you need to be able to look fabulous, go to a party, and run a marathon and climb a mountain in it and be comfortable, equally comfortable doing any of these things. It's like if I'm in my, 1880s gown, it's like, no, I cannot climb a mountain comfortably or, run a marathon, but I can dance, I can drink, I can flirt, I can lounge, and I can, do all the things that a dress like that is intended for. So, what is a book dress intended for? Well, certainly dancing and drinking and lounging and flirting, but also in critically in this particular in its particular scene in this book, it is a dress you wear if you need to go into battle, and that is what happens, and it is suitable for that.
Um, this book just has so much in it, and I find it so fun to read, and you've written it very accessible. So we do have these scenes where she's going into books that are older styled writing, but it never feels difficult to read in the way like an 18th century book sometimes does. How did you play with those things?
Well, I think it comes down a little bit to another book from my childhood was the Edward Eager books, which were about kids having magical adventures, and they're fun books. And I remember there was something where the four kids go off to the world of King Arthur and the Round Table, and there is so much fun in that scene of the very flowery medieval language being used in this tongue of in cheek way. And I thought of that, and I was like, no, I need to make sure that if I'm taking people back to these individual book worlds, I'm pulling out my copy of Sherlock Holmes and I'm saying, what are the things that Sherlock Holmes actually says? How does he talk? I'm pulling out, my Jane Austen, and I'm seeing like, what does Eleanor Dashwood and Marianne Dashwood, how do they talk? What are the kinds of things they say? And so I had fun with that because I wanted to recreate the worlds of these, classic famous novels. In the way that they sound as well as the way that they look, but hopefully, again, to make sure that they are accessible and they're not shutting the reader out.
It's a difficult balance to walk too, including these things and making sure that folks who don't typically read older fiction find it enjoyable, I would assume.
Well, I think a lot of the books that we love, though, they're classics for a reason. I mean, like Jane Austen is relentlessly accessible, which is why she continues to be great. I read The Three Musketeers, when I was probably in middle school, and I was so astounded by how, what a race it was, what an adventure. It was entirely accessible to me, even though I was only about 12 years old. And, so it's like you have to find the ways in which that these stories continue to be universal and continue to be inspiring to us. But I think they are, and that's the reason why they've stuck the test of time.
All right, I'll take your literary class. It's fine. Clearly you love these books a lot. Like you know them so well. Were there any that you wanted to include that you didn't know intimately from like past readings or just being aware of them?
Um, I actually have never read Wuthering Heights, which does have a brief cameo in this book. So I had to look it up, like, okay, where do I put this? What would the setting look like? Because I hadn't actually read it. I think there's a whole thing to be said about if you're a woman, like, are you a Jane Eyre or a Wuthering Heights girl? And I am a Jane Eyre girl all the way, and I know Jane Eyre like practically by heart. I've never been crazy about Wuthering Heights because I know about it, and I'm just like, I refuse to find Heathcliff and Kathy romantic. Heathcliff is a stack of red flags. He is not a book boyfriend. I am not a fan. And so therefore it's like I've never read it and it never appealed to me. But it did provide a fantastic setting for a particular scene in this book. And I thought, so okay, I did have to go in and like parse it out, like, okay, what would this look like? And pull up that chapter and be like, all right, I haven't read this, but I need to be able to at least set it convincingly for this one scene.
That's funny because I feel exactly the same way, and I do not know why people keep reading Wuthering Heights or keep adapting it. I just genuinely do not understand. It's beautiful setting wise, but like,
Well, that's why I picked it. Just as like, okay, I just need a looming, ominous gothic setting. Wuthering Heights is perfect for that. For relationship advice, no.
oh goodness no. Um, but we do have a lot of Alex goes through moments where she develops relationships after being alone for so long, which is so sweet to me because, everybody has felt lonely at some time. And I love that this is like you find people. So this is another theme in the book is you're finding your people.
Well, found family, speaking of tropes, is one of those tropes that I love and that I return to over and over in what I write. And whether I intend to or not, I come back to that. And it is, something that I really believe in sincerely. And I have a theory actually that most books and almost all TV shows are actually about found family, especially TV shows because these when you really think about it, it's not about the monster of the week, the case of the week, the courtroom drama of the week, the medical patient of the week. It's that you get to spend time with this little band of doctors or paranormal investigators or vampire slayers or monster hunters or lawyers or whatever. It's the little band of people that you get to spend time with week after week, regardless of what they're actually working on. Most TV shows, I think, have an element of found family because most people can sympathize with real family can be complicated. It can be difficult. It can be painful. It can be, like for someone like Alex, practically non existent. So the idea of being able to find your tribe and pull them together and know that they'll have your back, I think is a dream that we all can get behind. And so for Alex, that's part of the journey she goes on. It's not only about trying to find a new life and a place she belongs, it's trying to find people to whom she belongs and who will have her back because that's something she has never had. She was a kid who was more or less abandoned and spent her whole childhood abandoned, barely being carried along by the rules of the state. And so here she comes to this world where there's the librarian who is grumpy and who doesn't always have a lot of patience for her questions, but who also never not protect her if she's in danger. She finds Bo, who will have her back and will, genuinely believe that she's beautiful and that, that she can do this. And she can find some of the other patrons who the library has helped and realize that she has things in common with these people who also were at a point in their lives where they were so lost and desperate that the library gave them a door. And she finds these people and they do as much to heal her as the whole idea of finding a magic library does to heal her.
I would say in some cases more so than just finding the magical library. Like just being accepted is kind of the overarching story in my mind here.
It is. And it's just, but that acceptance takes many forms. It's finding the place, but it's also finding the people. And then it's also finding your calling. Because also, Alex, the other thing she finds here is that what she thinks she wants is escape. I just want to get away from this horrible existence that I have where I have like no hope that things are going to get better. But then she comes to find it's like, wait, what if just escape isn't enough? Can I have more than that? Is there something else I want to fight for? Is there something else that I am actually uniquely suited for? And that's the kind of thing that you start thinking as a person. If you can move out of survival mode where the only thing you're doing is try to keep one step ahead of disaster, try to keep your bills paid, try to keep the lights on, try to keep the roof over your head and your feet dry and food in the fridge. But once you can move past that just survival mode, you can think, wait, what do I actually want? Like now that I have the space to be able to consider that question. What do I want? What am I good at? What could I do with my life? And that's the other question that Alex starts to consider as she goes through this.
So I think books allow readers to try out different purposes in life. And that's really an important part of finding who you are is what do you want your life to be about, or do you want it to be about something specific? Like maybe you don't, maybe you just want to coast. That's fine. But I find this really interesting that she's finding her purpose in the library and in other people's need.
Yeah, and it's the thing that's one reason I'm a big advocate for rereading books that you love because sometimes books can be, or in fact, frequently, they can be different things to you at different points in your life. And it can tell you a lot about who you are and how you've changed if you revisit a book that you loved, or maybe even a book that you hated. I mean, sometimes things find us at the wrong point, and then you find them later and you're like, oh, this is for me. But it depends on where you are. I mean, like, I remember if you're going to Jane Austen, as we all do, it's like, when you're in your 20s, you're team Lizzie all the way. It's like, oh my God, you're Lizzie, you want Darcy, you want the guy, you want Pemberley. You're so embarrassed by your mother. It's like your sisters are so annoying. But if you read it later, it's like my sympathy for Mrs. Bennet grows the older I get because I'm like, okay, she's annoying, but she's a historic woman working with very, very little in her arsenal and a very narrow window in which to secure happiness and security and a stable financial future for her daughters. And she's working with everything she's got, and she's damned if they're going to be left in the gutter. And I can respect that, damn it. And it's like, but that's an opinion that comes with age and experience. And I
Yeah.
remember a friend saying that about War and Peace, or she said that like when I was 16, I thought that I thought that oh, not War and Peace, I think it was Anna Karenina. It's just like I thought the young hero and that it's like, oh, Levin is so romantic, he's so wonderful. As a grown woman, I want to bang him upside the head with a frying pan and be like, kid, get some practicality. So I think books and stories change for us depending on what point we are in our life. And that's why it's fun to revisit them to see if they hit differently.
Yeah, I definitely see that here. Um, Going back to this idea of tropes, do you think the Astral Library as a book would fit well into the kind of cozy fantasy realm, this idea of being cozy and safe, with not the high stakes that a lot of fantasy comes with?
Yeah, I think it probably does have a cozy element. And I think that is because, yeah, I did have this idea coming out of the pandemic. And I think the pandemic was a place where coziness was something that a lot of us were seeking. There's a reason why we were all watching the Great British Bake Off and, Bridgerton and reading a lot of romance where, these happy endings are guaranteed. We needed that. And we started seeing that actually in a lot of different genres, because I keep an eye on trends as a writer. And I was suddenly hearing from people that like cozy mystery was really booming because for a long time it really hadn't been because people wanted the whodunits and the mysteries, but they wanted things a little safer than the gritty noir. And I was starting to see there was cozy fantasy coming around. Legends and Lattes, the Orc with a coffee shop, and things like that were also coming around. So cozy elements were starting to make their way into a lot of the fiction trends that were starting to boom around that time. And so that probably influenced me too. I also came out of the pandemic really wanting something cozy and wanting a little comfort. And there's a lot of things about libraries. They are sanctuaries and they can be battlegrounds, certainly. And I didn't want to shy away from that. And there is a literal battle that is fought for in this library. But and even if this world does have its teeth and its shadows, it is also a place where you can sink in. You go to the Astral Library and it is not just a place, where there's books, but like you can find the exact perfect book for you right now. And there is an armchair that is soft and cozy and exactly fitting you. And there is a lamb's wool blanket that, smells like lavender. And you look over at the table at your side, and the library will happily serve up whatever book snack you like with your exact favorite kind of tea that is perfectly hot. And there will be a crackling fire, because there should be a crackling fire when you're reading. And there will be your favorite cookie that is just warm out of the oven. And there is a cat curled up and purring. And all these things are so tactile. And they really are, they're part of fantasies. I mean, this sort of like, I do think library core is absolutely a thing, where it's like, it's tea and it's cookies and it's coffee and it's scents like lavender and old books, and it is textures like fluffy blankets and the leather binding on a classic book, and the gilt edges and the ribbon bookmark, and these things under your fingertips, and these things that smell so good. All these things are things that comfort us, and they're part of a very specific kind of fantasy, I think, that so many readers absolutely have, myself included.
Which is why I think the Astral Library is going to be pretty popular for folks because this is the dream for many people.
Well, that's certainly what I thought, and it's certainly what I hope. So we'll see.
Speaking of, the Astral Library is out on February 14th, in time for Valentine's Day.
Not quite, actually. May want to redo that. It's 17th.
Okay. Oh, goodness. Okay. Uh, and the, sorry. Um, the Astral Library is going to be out on February 17th, so make sure you pre-order your books right now. It really helps authors know how popular this book is going to be, and it honestly just helps in general. So go pre-order it. Plus, there's going to be a fun copy, right?
Yes, I am so thrilled. This is total achievement unlocked for me, is that I this book is getting a special edition. It is getting an absolute shelf trophy. You're gonna want it. It's got these beautiful marbled end papers. It has those sprayed edges with like dragon scale detail. It's got this. It has a library card stamp on the inside, and I saw that and I was like, oh, be still my heart. So it is the most glorious, beautiful, bedecked, bedazzled, bejeweled special edition. You can pre-order it, and it's up for pre-order now. And I cannot wait to have that in my hands, because I have seen these bedazzled special editions for like Rebecca Yarros and for so much romantasy. They're so beautiful. I love that they're starting to make their way now to romance and historical fiction too. But I've never had a special edition, and so when they told me that the Astral Library would have a special edition with the sprayed edges and the special end papers and the illustrations, reader, I squeed.
I love them so much. Like, I always face my books like this too on my shelf. There's no real purpose other than me getting to touch these sprayed edges and these beautifully cared for books,
Oh
like
yeah,
I
it's
just
like
love
it's
it.
a whole tactile thing. Oh yes, it's such a thing.
Are you going to be doing any personalized copies anywhere, local bookstore of yours?
Well, I'm going to be touring for the Astral Library. I'm going all over the place, West Coast to East Coast. I'm going to Canada as well. You'll find the touring details on my Facebook page pinned to the top, my Instagram page pinned to the top. All my cities and event details are there. Also on my website and my events page. So I will be signing books everywhere I go for any of the events there. I'm sure I'll do some at my local, and I also did a pre-signed batch of tip sheets. So there will be some of these special editions that come pre-signed, And as soon as I have information about where you can order those, I'll make sure to post about it.
Perfect. I love hearing that there's these fun things that people can go to. Um, I kind of miss book tours.
Well, I love doing book tours. They can be exhausting, but it's like you're going to a different city every day. And like I remember from my last, I think I got the biggest laugh I've ever gotten in my life when someone said in like an event in Chicago, you're really hopping around, aren't you? Weren't you just in Minnesota yesterday? And not even making a joke, I just said with complete honesty, sure, let's go with that. I will hit a point like 2 weeks on the road. I don't know what city I'm in. I don't know what state I'm in. I barely know what time zone I'm in.
Do
I
you
start thinking of
typically,
I start thinking of like those rock stars who will literally like Sharpie the name of the city that their tonight's concert is in, so that way they don't like run onto a stage in Boston and say hello Houston. So I'll probably have to start doing that at some point.
oh goodness. At these events, do you do any type of reading beforehand?
I don't tend to read aloud just because I tend to feel like I want to give people something that they are not going to get from the book itself.
Okay.
And so what I tend to do is I love to just talk books the way you and I have been right now. I want to give you the behind the scenes peek and the inside scoop on what it was like to write and maybe what the seed of inspiration was and all the things that you can't necessarily get by just reading the book and the author note.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was great.
No, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad you enjoyed the Astral Library.
Oh my gosh, I loved it so much. And I really do think come February 17th when it's out, other people are going to be shouting how much they love it too. So make sure everybody goes pre-orders, please.
Yes, please. I love you. Would love you forever for doing that.
And if anybody out there has liked this conversation, I hope that you send me a like, leave a comment, rate the show. I want to hear what you have to say, and I really want to hear after you've read the Astral Library. So please come back. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a lovely, lovely day.
Thank you very much and happy reading.